Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. These are words that we find from the Gospel of John. These are words that are described to us as having been a message from Jesus Christ to his disciples after the time of their Last Supper, their Passover meal. Jesus, knowing that he was about to be arrested and leaving them, and he was trying to summarize as best he could all the teachings from his 2 to 3 years of ministry, all of his teachings, trying to summarize them for his followers, assuring them that they would never be alone, trying to comfort them as these words comfort us now. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. We call this the peace that surpasses all understanding, the peace that we wish to prevail on earth. And although this peace surpasses our understanding, it does not surpass our ability to experience. This week is Unity's World Day of Prayer, and this month is International Day of Peace. And so we're exploring the concept of peace and the meaning of peace, what it means to us individually. These words of Jesus, peace I leave with you, are a wonderful promise. They're a life-giving command. There's nothing you have to earn. There's nothing you have to do. Peace is given. It's a gift. And all we have to do is to remember to turn within and to find that essence of peace. It's written on our hearts, to find the peace of God. Now, everybody breathe. We've been blessed with such beautiful music this morning and beautiful and inspiring meditation by Lori. This concept of peace, one that we want to embrace and one that we each want to embody. When we think of peace this way, it makes us feel all warm and fuzzy and calm. So how do we move from this immersion in our human experience to instead feel the peace of God? What actions do we need to take? What can we do to experience peace in a greater way every day? Well, as many have said before me, and many will continue to say, it's an inside job. It's all an inside job. It's up to each one of us to find that peace within us and to continue to express it in our world to the best of our ability. Well, this week I received in the mail my set of Russian nesting dolls, and I hope that this will help us visualize how we might see our experience here on earth and how we might better prepare ourselves to experience peace and to express peace more often. So the smallest of the dolls, the tiniest one, this is our body. This is our earthly body. This body is dense. It's held down by gravity. It has the 5 senses. It has our brain. But there's a denseness to our body, an earthiness to our body. And whenever we hear in Scripture the disciple Peter being described, he's describing that essence for us of this denseness. You know, Peter, the name Peter means rock, and they talk about the rock upon which the foundation of the church. And Peter is so often described as not quite getting it the first time around as Jesus explains his message and his lesson. That's our earthly aspect. That's our more dense aspect, our body. It's our carbon suit. We need it to move around and to experience life here on this planet, on Earth. Our body is encased by, protected by the next doll, our ego. Our ego looks around, scans for danger, warns us when there's something that is not safe, keeps us protected and in control. And if we don't watch it, our egos can just bump around into other people's egos, create all sorts of drama and conflict, which is not what we want. We want peace. Our ego is not a bad thing. A healthy ego helps us set goals, focus on what we want, gives us the confidence to move forward. And so an ego is not a bad thing. We just need to remind the ego that it is not alone so that it doesn't overreact, so that we don't find ourselves in fear most of the time. And then our body and our ego is enfolded in our soul. In our soul. Our soul is both our consciousness and our subconsciousness. The soul comes from spirit. We want to live from this space of our soul. We had a talk recently about the ego being in service to the soul. Our soul is eternal. We don't have a soul. We are soul. And our soul happens to have a body and an ego and a personality, but we are soul. It is from this place, this state, that we find that we can live and move and have our being in peace. And that is truly the desire of our heart, is to remember who we are and whose we are. And to remember that for every other person that we interact with, that we read about, that we see on television, that we bump into at the grocery store, every other person. And then these three are enfolded in God. In God. All that is divine love, universal love, whatever term you use for Godness. Now we know that God is everywhere present. So God is also within soul, within ego, within our body, for there is no place that God is not. And so as we visualize ourselves having this makeup of these four individual parts that work with and entwine and interact with one another, it helps us to be mindful of how to be in this world. Now, I'm going to give you this morning 10 ways to shift your thoughts to help guide you to a more peaceful way of being. And I'm going to be going through these rather quickly. So if you're taking notes or if you want to be refreshed on what these 10 are, just shoot me an email or a text with your email address, and I'll be glad to send you a wonderful article by Ellen Davenport where these 10 are described. And so the first one is to be aware of spiritual bypass. And we're really good at this in Unity, where we say, oh, it's all good, let it go with the flow. And we are here as spiritual beings having this human experience. And so we must move through this human experience, not sidestep it, not get caught up in all of the drama, not live through whatever we are experiencing full time. As we're going through hell, we don't build a condo, we don't set up a tent, we don't want to stay there permanently, but we move through whatever the experience is, allow ourselves to feel the drama and the pain of it to get to the other side. This morning, I'm going to give you a couple of quotes by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. This is a Jesuit priest, a French philosopher of the 20th century. He says, you are not a human being in search of a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being immersed in a human experience. And so we must give that human experience the opportunity to teach us whatever it is to teach us, for us to sometimes feel pain and hurt. Remember, in the word grow, there's ow. It's usually unpleasant, this growing, but allow ourselves at our own pace to move through the human experience. The second one is to remember that words have power. As we're moving through this human experience, perhaps we can give ourselves a pause and not be too anxious to name something either good or bad. For many of us have had the experience of thinking something horrible happened in our lives, only to look back later and say, oh, I'm so glad I lost that job. I'm so glad that relationship ended. I'm so glad. Because when we get to the other side, we see that it actually was not against us, it was for us. And so for us to be more cautious in naming a thing good or bad, perhaps just say, that's interesting, or let's see what will come of this. Try to step outside of the experience without naming it, especially naming it a bad thing. The third is to stay grounded, for we don't want fear to control our lives. We want our soul, our spirit to control our lives. And so to stay grounded, when we find ourselves feeling anxious, feeling worry, maybe even losing sleep with anxiety, to ask ourselves, where are our feet? Our feet are right here in the present moment. And regardless of what may be happening in our mind about worry, about thinking about the future, about something that might happen, we can be aware of right here, right now, this is where I am, and balance ourselves in that space. The fourth one is to get the facts. And remember, facts change and facts are neutral. Now, not everyone is reassured by facts, but when we can obtain information that is credible, that is reliable, it can often take the scare, the fear out of a situation for us, and to hold those facts as neutral and knowing that facts do change. Focus on your ultimate goal. That's number 5. And the ultimate goal for all of us is the same. Ultimately, we want to be happy. Ultimately, we want relationships in our lives that are supportive and loving. Ultimately, we want to live a life of peace and ease. If we can keep our eyes on that ultimate goal, instead of disagreeing about how to get there, which is really the disagreement we have with others, is the way that they're going about how they're getting to their ultimate goal may be different from how we get to our ultimate goal. If we can stay away from anger and judgment and condemnation, we already know those don't work, and look beyond appearances and hold that ultimate goal of peace and harmony and love for all, then we can live our lives in a more peaceful way. The sixth one is to ask yourself what you can learn from a situation, especially if you are feeling a judgment towards another. Ask yourselves how you might express that same characteristic that you're being judgmental of. Are you sometimes prejudiced? And that's what you would ask yourself. If you're upset with a situation where someone appears to be prejudiced, are there times when I am prejudiced? How am I violent in my thinking at times? How do I grab power? Whatever it is that you're seeing in another, ask yourself, how do I express this? How or when do I express this? And allow it to be a teaching moment and a healing moment and a changing moment for yourself. The seventh is to ask yourself, what can I be for? So much of activism over our history, as well as today, comes from a space of anger. It's a reaction. Instead, what can I be for? What can I give of myself to support in a positive way? Mother Teresa said, do small things with great love. All of us have the ability to do small things with a great love. For what we give our attention to grows. What we want to grow are the positive things in the world, the things built on love. And so we as individuals can be a part of that. The eighth one is to take an even bigger step. That when we find ourselves being judgmental, finding ourselves condemning others, not only release that thought, but replace it with love. For only love casts out fear. We're told that in the scriptures. So take that bigger step to replace whatever the thought that you are holding, whatever the judgment is that you are holding. Replace that thought with only love and allow that feeling of love within you to move forward from you, which will send peace and love, calm, blessings out into the universe. It affects more than just your personal space. Be that space of love and recognize, number 9, that you are part of a bigger picture. We are all part of a bigger picture, a picture that we only have a glimpse of. But to know that you are part of a bigger picture, you are intricately connected to the web of life, and that your presence and how you hold yourself, the thoughts that you hold, makes a difference in the world. And so you are part of a larger perspective of which we may never have privy to understand or to get a greater glimpse of, and to be okay with that. And the last one, the 10th one, is to remember that every thought counts. Each prayerful thought, every prayerful thought you have blesses the world with peace. For we are not alone in the universe. We are connected through our oneness with God. The individual that I quoted earlier, the Jesuit priest, the French philosopher, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, he came up with a term called noosphere. Noosphere being that there's a thinking level of the earth, and that it contains every thought that we have, and it determines the collective experience. You'll hear me refer to it as mass consciousness, the race consciousness, the consciousness of the human race. We all add to that noosphere, to that race consciousness, by every thought we hold. And so the thoughts we hold, we want them to be filled with peace and love and compassion and acceptance and inclusivity. We want the thoughts that we add to this collective consciousness to be positive ones that bless our neighbors and ourselves, not condemn. So how then do we move past these 10 steps to actually feeling that sense of peace in our hearts? Well, this past week, I was blessed to have an experience that I was not alone in. I was with all the rest of our board members as we had a training session via Zoom with Reverend Charlene Manuel. And she took us through some very difficult steps. We had to look at our bylaws. We had to look at the responsibilities of the board and the job description of the minister. And we looked at goals and short-term goals and long-term goals, and how to hold the church and bless the church and be good stewards of the church. We had some tough stuff to do. But she started us out with conversations in the movement of spirit. She started the morning by us holding one another in prayer. Now, there's many ways to do that. Someone has an opening prayer, okay? In our board meetings, we ask for individuals to share what's on their mind. You know, we go around and ask everyone for a check-in. This was so much more than that. The first person spoke a concern, a personal concern that was on their heart that they would like held in prayer. Then another person picked up that prayer and stated right then a prayer to support the individual. Then the person who stated a prayer expressed what was on their heart, and another person picked up and spoke out loud right then a prayer for them. It was amazingly connecting our hearts to be right there in a space of love and compassion for one another before we touched any of the rest of our agenda, to start with that place of love and compassion for one another. It was a beautiful lesson for us because even though we were on Zoom for, 7 or 8 hours, it was a long day. I left feeling like it was a love fest, that we accomplished so much and we did it with great respect and love for one another. Not that we always agreed. That's not what you want a board to do. You want differences of opinions so that all voices can be heard, but that there was great respect and love for all. Now you may wonder how this relates to you. Well, all of us carry into the world, whether it's carrying into a board meeting or a search team committee or a finance team or to a volunteer group that we're volunteering with, or when we go to the grocery store or when we get together with family or even sit with a family member in our home, we all carry with us this point of view. We all have a point of view about what's going on, and we all want to be heard. We all want our point of view to be respected. That's part of life. And where we get hung up is when we're stuck, forgetting that we're spirit, forgetting that we're soul, and instead are running around with our bodies protected by our egos and bumping into other people. It has to be my way. My voice is the only one that should be heard. I think it should be this way, and I'm only happy if that's the way it goes. When we allow ourselves to remember that we are soul that has a body and an ego, then we can move into the space of a creative and brave space where we can be collaborative and effective, where we can disagree, we can name our worries and come from an authentic place. We can show up authentically. And from that space, we are aware. We are aware of the movement of spirit, and we gain clarity and joy and unity when we join together, whether it's one other person in our life, whether it's ourselves in our lives and our egos, when we come together to respect and to love and to acknowledge the other. It is from this space, when we remember what we love about our world, what we remember, what we love about the other person, what we remember, what we love about ourselves, that we're able to enter into that brave space of being able to hold other points of view and not having that shake the foundation of our peace, not having that shake the essence of who we are, for we are above all things a spiritual being immersed in this human experience. This morning, that's what I hold for each one of you, that divine awareness of your body, your ego, your soul, and your spirit. I see each one of you, each one of us, experiencing life as we bump into one another with great love, with great acceptance, and with great peace. God bless you this day.